of Kentucky's biggest issues is the homeless population. In response to this issue, in July 2024, the Kentucky government banned street camping. If a person is found there with the intention to sleep with like camping equipment, such as like tents, sleeping bags, like their belongings, they'll be guilty of unlawful camping. If an officer finds someone street camping, they issue them a warning. After receiving a few warnings, if they are still found to be street camping, they are issued a citation and a fine. The purpose behind this ban was to incentivize people into seeking help and shelter. Additionally, to aid the situation, officers were required to hand out information on outreach services. In December of that same year, WDRB covered the police enforcement of this new ban. Caleb Stewart, who was the head of Downtown Area Patrol, is quoted saying, "When people maybe feel just a bit more friction with their current situation, living on the street, they'll make a better decision and decide it's not what they want to do anymore." When I called several police stations in Louisville this week, the majority of people I spoke with expressed indifference with the situation. One officer remarked that he didn't think it made much of a difference for the better or the worse, particularly because he believed before it was pretty standard practice to be handing out flaggers anyway. My perspective on this ban is extremely biased, because throughout my junior and senior year of high school, I spent my Sundays volunteering with an homeless outreach service. So the relationships I formed with people throughout this experience really shaped my attitude towards homelessness. The reality of this ban is that it's based upon a fundamental misunderstanding of what causes homelessness. Unfortunately, it goes much deeper than just standing up and choosing not to be homeless. Like, the biggest contributing factors of homelessness, at least in Louisville, are health issues, whether physical or mental. A lot of the homeless population are actually veterans and experience PTSD. Their common one is economic hardship, of course, social factors like people being kicked out by their families, systematic inequalities, and the biggest one being the housing market, as there is a significant lack of affordable housing within Louisville. So furthermore, not only does this ban not address these source issues, it also punishes unhoused individuals. The way the ban typically goes, a homeless person is given a few warnings. Someone has different reasoning behind being on the streets or in shelters. Oftentimes the shelters are actually full, so they really genuinely don't have anywhere else to go. There are like a number of other reasons why people choose not to be in shelters, whether it's fear of personal property being stolen, fear of other homeless people. A lot of people have pets, like dogs or cats, and they're not allowed in shelters, and those animals are their reason for living. So rather than being separated from them, they care more about the animal than themselves, so they continue to live on the streets. So after being issued a few warnings, this homeless person is likely to still be on the street. And once they're issued a citation and a fine which they cannot pay, literally they get arrested and sent to jail. So in reality, this ban doesn't really do much to actually incentivize someone from leaving the streets, because it does not properly implement the steps for them to do so. It only punishes them for currently being on the streets. Stephanie Johnson is quoted as saying, "We cannot arrest our way out of poverty." Buying this entire ban, the wicked issue I discovered, aforementioned fundamental misunderstanding of what causes homelessness. A lot of people see homelessness and they focus on the stigma against like addiction or mental health, and they see it as like just need like the motivation to get up and fix their lives. There are like numerous factors that actually contribute to homelessness, which are much more complex and in-depth than just motivation. In order to improve the epidemic of homelessness, it's essential to understand the issue comprehensively, because the majority of people misunderstand what actually causes homelessness. There hasn't been any real solution to it. For my 5 entry points for change, I will start with my small scale entry point for change is to release the ban. When I was ideating for this solution, I was thinking of all these different ways that, rather than the citation inevitably leading to arrest, ways it could be altered and turning it into a way to genuinely spark change in these people's lives, and it just didn't work. It didn't work. So my small scale actionable thing is to release the ban. My entry point that works with existing systems is to fund shelters more. Shelters in Louisville, at least where I'm from, are incredibly underfunded. They're understaffed, there aren't enough, they're always full. A lot of different things that can be done to shelters to make them more hospitable and more effective, particularly deeper staff training. My empathetic actionable entry point is to have a movement towards community education. As I said before, the biggest issue behind this ban is this fundamental misunderstanding. What really needs to be changed is the stigma against homelessness and mental health and addiction and all these things. There needs to be a push for community education. My bold entry point is that, particularly in rehab, there needs to be more long-term options for drug recovery and stabilization. Currently, most options have a limited time point of like a month, a few days, depending on like what is available, what is mandated. The longer-term recovery options, particularly for people with severe disabilities or PTSD or mental illness. My most speculative entry point to change was something I read about, and it was creating the right to shelter. I know it's a very controversial idea, which is why I've chosen it to be my most speculative one. But by creating a right to shelter, it would force the state to put more funding into shelters and individualized homes and more affordable housing, and really would push towards that solution. My single moment of color is like a reddish brown within the facial features to emphasize the point that we all are human. I feel like a lot of time we are divided by our differences, and especially with homelessness, there's a lot of people are dehumanized in other people's eyes based on their circumstances, or race or gender or ideas or beliefs. And I think overall, like, it's really important to remember we really all are people. Like, even as I was creating this project, like, I was thinking about I was trying to see from the perspective of the people who created this ban, and I really felt it just had to be malicious. Like, it just felt like it just must be malicious. And after doing some research, I kind of stepped back and saw that it really just came from a misunderstanding, and I really just have to like challenge my own like emotional response and remember that we really all are people. I don't really think many people in the world do things out of malicious intent. I think there's always a justifiable reason, at least from their perspective, and that usually comes from a disconnect of information and perspective.